quotations first. There's an American author by the name of Parker J. Palmer, whose book, The Courage to Teach, was recommended to me by my previous boss back in New Zealand, and would be one of the most influential pieces of writing I've come across in the last 20 years as a teacher, I think. He wrote another book called Let Your Life Speak, Listening to the Voice of Vocation. That's only a little slim volume, and that's well worth reading as well. But Palmer says we teach who we are. So I think it's really important for us as teachers to do some probing and prodding into who we are that teach, because we don't teach innocently. We teach from our own cultural and belief backgrounds and practices. Then I came across this quote quite recently from a writer called Bartholos. If we don't know ourselves well, we cannot know either our students or the subject. And I've put the references for both of those at the bottom there. We'll put the whole PowerPoint on the ERE blog so you can access all this stuff. You don't have to take copious notes if you're even so inclined to. So generally, the paper that I wrote that I took to the Cairn conference in Lincoln last year with some of my colleagues here was about developing a teaching philosophy. And several of you have started from primary school teaching backgrounds, and so have I. I think it'll take you anywhere, basically, a good primary school background. So your philosophy is basically, I do a lot of work with people in the tertiary sector about writing teaching philosophies. It's why and how we teach, what we believe about ourselves and our students, our colleagues, our wider environment, although not everybody wants to get that bogged down in the wider environment. We'll talk about that later. And these reflect our values as teachers. So the first little photo there is one of my values. Family matters a lot to me. That's my latest little grandson, who was born on the 5th of December last year. That family of 3 little boys are over in England. I'm going to miss them like mad when I go back to New Zealand, because it's a long way from New Zealand to here. The second photo is my team back in New Zealand, and I've put that one in because one of the things that I really value is collegial practice. And when I first came to DCU, because of the short-term contract thing, nobody had morning tea together, you know, everybody was like ships that passed in the night. Well, I had to do something about that. So now we have a little coffee table that I filched from somewhere. It sits in the middle of our shared office space, and we stop and have a drink from time to time, or lunch together or something. We share and we value each other's practice. And the last one is overtly Scottish, as you will have picked up from the Bruce Ferguson in my surname. My maiden name was Bruce, and I've married a Ferguson, who, confusingly enough, has a first name of Bruce, so that kind of screws everybody's heads up in the first place. But it's, I think, an issue that dinner fash yourself and keep your head. It's kind of a bit of advice that I give new teachers a lot. We do the best we know how, and when we know better, we do better. And so I kind of encourage people not to get too panicky when something goes wrong, because things go wrong all the time with all of us. And it's part of my teaching philosophy, I guess, is to learn to roll with the punches and not get too knocked down by them. So, question. How do you, as a teacher, develop your teaching philosophy? I rather like the row down, you know, sitting there wondering reflecting on the meaning of life and so forth. So, from my perspective, one of the things that I've done a lot of in my time as a staff developer in tertiary environments is classroom observations. I'll go into people's classes at their invitation. I'll watch them teaching. They'll tell me what they want feedback on, and at the end of the session, we have a meeting, and I always say, how do you think it went? One of the things that I've found in Ireland is that you're not that great at blowing your own trumpets. Well, neither are New Zealanders, but if somebody tells you you do a good job, it's okay to say, oh yeah, okay, maybe I did. But the Irish, oh sure, no, I wasn't that good. But I think, in my experience, all good teachers are reflective practitioners, because you do not survive in the classroom without being a reflective practitioner. You look at what you do, you agonise over what doesn't go well, you may or may not, depending on your orientation, pat yourself on the back when things do go well, but you kind of look at your practice and strive to improve it. So people do that in a variety of ways. Some people do it just inside their heads. Some people do it by keeping notes of various kinds. Like, because of my primary school background, I always tend to have a lesson plan with me that kind of roughly maps out what I'm hoping to do in a session. And if something goes badly wrong, I write myself a little post-it note and stick it on that lesson plan inside a plastic sleeve. So next time I go to teach that session, I'll know what I did wrong or what I think needs improving. Because otherwise, I've got past relying on my brain at my age. If I don't write it down, I'll get to that session next time and I think, something didn't go well there, and I'm glad if I can think what it is. So, you know, keeping notes. They don't have to be big, substantial notes. Just the post-it note type thing will help. Videotaping yourself is an interesting one. In 1994, I was on teacher exchange to the UK with a British Council fellowship, and the professor that I worked with there was into videoing practice, and it wasn't done in New Zealand at all, and I thought that was a good idea. So when I went back to New Zealand, I put a notice in the staff newsletter and said, anybody interested in videotaping each other's practice, and we'll, you know, do a bit of discussion about this. There's a resounding silence except from an agriculture tutor and an office studies tutor. And the agriculture tutor dropped out, so the office technology tutor and I videotaped our own practice, wrote a report on it, swapped tapes and reports, and looked at what each other had come up with. Well, that was absolutely gobsmacking, because one of the academic influences on my practice has been the work of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator, who talks about moving from banking education to emancipatory education and basically, you know, trying to be a liberatory educator. And I had this kind of daft idea that I was somewhat up the liberatory end of things. When I looked at the videotape, I saw a bossy old bat, and I thought, oh God, you know, the gap between theory and practice here is fairly immense, and I need to do something about it. So I wrote quite a critical analysis of my own work. When Kate had a look at the tape and looked at my thing, she said, you're being too hard on yourself, Pip. She said, what you're not seeing in that video is the students, because for ethical reasons the tape was picking up only me. She said, I've been a student in your class, and I've seen you kind of move things along when there's evidence of disengagement or, you know, not making sense of things. She said, I think you're being too hard on yourself. So I thought, bless you, my child, you know, it's saving my ego a treat. But it's actually a very powerful way of getting a view of your own practice. Robbie Burns, the Scottish poet, and I'll try and spare you the accent because I love this quote, and I think you've used it too, Tom. He was sitting in a church in Scotland watching a headlouse crawl across the bonnet of the lady in front of him during probably a boring Presbyterian sermon. And he wrote this poem called Te a Loose, or To a Louse, and one chapter of which goes, would some power the giftie gie us to see ourselves as others see us? It would fray many a blunder free us in foolish notion. So if you videotape your practice or get somebody else in to look at your practice, you get that insight into what you're doing well and what you might need to do something about. So the peer observation is obviously part of it. Team teaching is another really good way of getting feedback on your practice and scrounging other people's good ideas. And it's something that I've done a lot of in the past. As the economy has tightened up and it's become increasingly difficult to double staff a lecture, that's less common than it used to be. It might be something that you can do, and it really is quite effective, I think. So those are some ways of reflectively practicing. So that's the Irish version of the don't keep your head in the previous one. And again, you know, it's that issue of don't beat yourself up when you get things wrong, because we all get things wrong and we all learn from it. So, a bit of kind of theory background, if you like, here. In my experience, it's not that big a step from becoming a reflective teacher to becoming an action researcher. And back in the day, what I did my own PhD on was using action research to help develop a research culture in the Polytech that I worked in as a staff developer. Because that Polytech had just got degree granting status and had a whole lot of staff who'd come in from being painters and mechanics and nurses and potters and whatever, who didn't see themselves as teachers, let alone as researchers. But because I had been in their classrooms giving them feedback, I could see them using exactly the same skills as reflective practitioners, as action researchers use. But I've just picked up here what I think are some of the key differences between reflective practice and action research. So the first one is that the reflective practitioners tend to be sort of just going on what's immediately around them and not necessarily reaching out to the wider literature. They may not be rigorous and systematic collecting specific data. They may just be sort of responding on the hoof to what happens in front of them. And I know these are generalisations, and some reflectively practising teachers will do these things. The other thing is reflectively practising teachers often don't publicise their work. I have fought an uphill battle at DCU when I've been doing classroom coaching sessions with staff, and I've said, hey, look, that aspect of your practice is brilliant. Have you thought of getting a paper out of that? Oh, sure, no. Oh, no, it's not that good. I couldn't be doing that, you know. What would other people think of me? It's like, oh dear, how do you contribute to the literature? You know, how do you expand other people's understandings of your area? Like Tom doing his investigating reflective writing and engineering. Now, that's a big step. It's not the norm, which is why I made that facetious comment about pork chops and synagogues before. You know, you can get very unpopular with your colleagues if you do something outside the square. But on the other hand, if you try it out and you write about it, you are expanding, you know, the wider understanding of your field. So next, just a description of action research, and this one is from Jean McNiff, whose work you probably all know very well. She's got a great website, www.jeanmcniff.com. There's